Stations 1 and 5 Hyrox, stations 2 and 5 Decker, hybrid CrossFit exercise stations that must not be dismissed. Hello and welcome to On the Rocks podcast with me, Coach Marshy. Hope everyone's well. And what we're going to do is jump straight into what I've just said and welcome today's guest. So, hello, Jane. How are you, Jane?
I'm so good. How are you?
Yeah, really good. Welcome to the show. So, before we go into anything else, let's literally dive straight into that. Why is it in the hybrid space Ergs are dismissed, or are they dismissed now?
I think that for a very long time, the entire industry has dismissed them as being kind of just the fitter and bigger you are, the better you are at it. So they've been dismissed as kind of low skill, high aerobic capacity kind of exercises. And I think that in this hybrid space right now, they just, they take up 25% of the obstacles at Hyrox, but for a lot of people, they think if you just fight through, you're going to do as well as somebody who's actually technically proficient on it. So dismissed is a good word for it. And I think it's the entire industry, not just the hybrid space.
Yeah. And I think, being a gym instructor and personal trainer here in the UK, don't know how it is for you in Australia, but when you go and do your course, you just kind of get a bit of a 5 minutes of, legs, arms, legs. And that's about what you get told. And then you get kind of left to it. And then you're off into a gym and you're teaching people, right? But that's not the reality of the situation.
No. And I think that there's a real, and we've talked about this before, as a trainer, and when you go through your course, it's like the most important thing is that you keep people safe. And it's like, so we're taught to keep people safe. And then when it comes now to this hybrid space, we want people to perform. And there is actually a difference between keeping people safe and then also enabling them to perform. And that's where extra education has to happen. But definitely in general courses here, there's nothing on the Ergs at all. And that's why I created Erg Army, because there was nothing in the education that I'd gone through. So I was like, this is a gap in the market and I'm going to fill that gap.
Yeah. And I think when we dive into that in a second, there are some specifics around that I want to sort of go through. But in terms of that dismissed kind of title within the industry, and I agree, it's not just in Hyrox or in a hybrid space, it's everywhere. But that dismissed kind of thing, are we in a point now where people are starting to understand that statement of you can't win it on the Ergs, actually maybe you can win it on the Ergs? And you go to even a Hyrox course potentially right at the beginning, you were being told, oh, you're not going to win it on the ski erg, you're not going to win it on the rower. But that dismissed kind of thing, those statements were really prominent definitely a year ago, and before that. Are you hoping that's changing?
Yeah, I think that the stage we're at right now, because I totally agree with what you just said, I think the stage where we're at right now is this understanding that you may not be able to win it on the Ergs yet, but you can definitely lose it on the Ergs. And I think that that's kind of a more exciting space almost than this idea that you can win it on the Ergs, because if it costs you too much energy to achieve either the same outcome as the person next to you or a worse outcome, then that energy is going to cost you later. And that's why the hybrid space is so exciting, because you can't necessarily be like a full-blown specialist in it. Like if you look at the best in our space right now, they're exceptional at everything. There isn't really a huge weakness somewhere, but they're not like an erg specialist. They're not necessarily a running specialist. They've got to be good at everything. And so I think that's a really exciting place for us right now, because what Erg Army has always tried to teach is efficiency, and efficiency is less energy for a better result. And so it's like, if people understanding you might not win it, but you will definitely lose it there is exciting.
Yeah, no, cool. So talk to us about Erg Army. You are Jane from Erg Army. You created Erg Army. What is it? and what's kind of its mission statement and why you did it?
Yeah, so I created Erg Army in 2016 now. So I used to own a gym in Melbourne and absolutely love it. I've worked in the fitness space since 2001, and in kind of every way that I possibly could get my hands dirty in fitness, that's what I've done because I'm just obsessed with people's betterment. So I'm just obsessed with people being just a little bit better every single day and having a better day because of their experience in a fitness space. And so while I owned my gym, I was had the ergs in the gym, and I was like, I still remember I can hear my voice coming out of my mouth. I'm like, yeah, we'll just slap it up to 10 because, we want you to work as hard as you possibly can and just pull as hard as you can. Like just all the normal stuff you hear around it. And I remember watching people and being like, a lot of people are quite miserable here. Like, why are they miserable? And if I'm looking at you, if I've got eyes on you right now and you were doing a deadlift the way that you're rowing, I wouldn't be okay with that. And I started to really critically analyze the way that we moved on the machines. And I then became a part of this group that are based in Salt Lake City called Jim Jones. And to get through a Jim Jones certification, you've got to row a 2K and ski a 2K. And I remember being like, I'm pretty big and strong. And just for anybody who's listening or watching, I'm not that big or strong. But in my head, I'm like this massive, big, like, I don't know, like Clydesdale or something. And I remember just being like, yeah, I'll just pull as hard as I can. And you had to get a sub 7-minute 52K on each of those machines. And so I went and joined a rowing club and realized that I was actually, in fact, very bad at rowing, very, very bad. And putting it to a 10 was very incorrect. And I started to learn so much. And I was like, wow, like if I don't know this, and I've worked in the industry for 15 years now, how many other people that work in the industry don't know this? And I got really excited by it and started to realize that maybe this could become my specialty. So sold my gym, started a podcast. I'm a big fan of the podcast, and traveled all around the world after going through that Jim Jones certification to learn from the best. And so spent 2 years running a podcast, traveling, learning. And from there, I created what's now referred to as Erg Army. And what I always wanted to do was I wanted to take the years of work a rower puts in and condense it into 2 hours of education for the everyday athlete to have a better experience and performance on the ergs. So what I bring through Erg Army is not this experience as an Olympic rower or even a good rower at all, but this experience as somebody who's worked in fitness, speaks fitness, who's specialized on the ergs. So our mission statement is about sharing magic. So one of the things we want to do is share magic to give people the best hour of their day. So I want to teach coaches and people how to have a better experience, create better performance on the ergs, and share just a little bit of magic with that.
Yeah, on a personal level, I can say you tick that box. We'll talk about that Erg Army tour that you've done in a minute. But it's interesting what you say there about all those years of experience in the industry, and then you still didn't know. To be honest, when you came here to my gym, I'm 17 years in, and I'm standing there, my chin's on the floor, and I'm thinking, oh, what is it you've been doing? It's not that we're not qualified to have done it, but it's like, what have you actually been telling people, Neil? What is it you're actually trying to get out of this? And it was really insightful. So I would recommend any coach listening to this to minimally go and look at your Instagram and learn what you can from that, because but in person it was a fantastic experience. And I think you're definitely ticking that box for that mission statement, because it was magic as well. It was a great, it wasn't just about
so
the
much
ergs.
fun,
It's
wasn't
actually
it?
everything was fun, and it's all fun, and you really got involved. So I'll ask you about that in a second. In terms of the journey with Erg Army, then did it kind of, you've done this tour, and it's been a world tour, really. You've been everywhere. How did it kind of, how did that bit start? How did that decision come about? And where were you when it sort of started and made you realize Hyrox is the sport and I need to kind of get involved with that?
Yeah. Oh, great question. And I just wanted to touch on something else you just said. Is one of the reasons our event was so good is because your community is so great as well. And it's like they're fun and they're And part of that is because of how you lead them and the humility you've got to be able to learn from others. And that's actually the process that was really important to me as well with Erg Army, is have enough humility to learn from others that know more than you. Because one of the things, I used to be a lawyer, and one of the things with being a lawyer, I worked in family law, is we don't give advice outside of our specialty. And so if you want advice on tax law or you want advice on property, you go to that specialist. And yet in this fitness space, there is a bit of an expectation that we're standing there and we should know absolutely everything. And it doesn't really happen in other industries. So I think it's really important in the fitness space. I know that there's a lot of ego involved, but it's like, it's okay not to know everything. Like it is okay to continually upskill. And so the process for me in building this out, it was really important for me to travel around and learn from the best. And so one of the really key fundamental learnings I actually had was through Olympic lifting. I learned through the process of teaching something so highly complex, the patience you need to have as a coach in teaching something. And so with the traveling internationally, the reason I even got into that is because I did so much international education. I built a really strong network all around the world. It wasn't just based in Australia, because I was learning from everybody. And because I put myself in a position to be a student, I made some really strong connections with people. So my first world tour was actually in 2017. I actually was teaching overseas before I was teaching in Australia. Because in Australia, we have something we refer to as the tall poppy syndrome. And I don't know if it's the same over there, but basically the idea is it's like a metaphor. In a field of poppies, no one wants to be the one that stands out more than the others, because everyone else will cut them down. And that's a very Australian conditioning culturally. And so it was actually
the British are brilliant at that.
They probably invented
they're
it.
so good at that. We are great at that. But yeah, go on. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah. And whereas in America, and so my first work was in America, because in America, it's not like that. Like in America, it's like, you want to be awesome, you can do anything. You can be anybody you want to be, you do that. And it was a really interesting experience for me, because my first tour was America, and I went around to different gyms, and I realized that the way I introduced myself couldn't be one where you're quite humble. It has to be like, I've done all these amazing things and literally I'm the best and you should all learn from me. And that's an absolute summary of it, but that has to be the undercurrent. Whereas when you're teaching in England or Australia, culturally appropriate is not telling everybody that you're the best. So I definitely did a lot more work internationally before I did in Australia. And then what happened is people in Australia went, wow, Jane travels all around the world and does this. She must be amazing. And really, I did that because it was almost easier to start with to get experience. And to be completely honest, I made absolutely no money for about 2 years. It was definitely costing me more to go and do this. But I was really building my resume with that. So I can't exactly remember the question you asked me.
So yeah, it was kind of how you ended up in the kind of latest Erg Army
Hyrox
tour
space.
and Hyrox space, yeah. But no, I think that's really relevant what you've said. I think it's a good point that the non-American listeners can really take home
relate
to.
Totally. I remember in 2022, we were running some workshops in the UK and Europe, and a lot of people coming along were like, oh, we're racing at Hyrox. We want to learn about this. I'm like, what is this Hyrox? So I'm Googling, and I'm like, oh my God, are you telling me there is an event out there that is running and then ski erg and then running and then sleds? I was like, this sounds like the best time I could ever imagine. Just from a totally selfish point of view, I was like, that actually sounds like the perfect event. And then I'm obsessed with strategy. I love strategy. I love trying to outsmart fatigue. And that's why I'm such a technician in things, because I'm like, if you can move well, you're going to outsmart fatigue to an extent. And we've done a lot of work in the CrossFit space. So we were Tia Claire Toomey's ski coach. We've also coached
By the way, on that, I'm glad you bring that up. Watching her on the Erg on the CrossFit Games, I was watching it. I was like, because we'd had that conversation, right? I was like, oh my God, look at Tia's ski compared to the others. You can tell she speaks to Jane, like you can tell Jane's coached her. And it was like, it was brilliant. It was cool.
I know. And isn't it so lucky? Because the way that happened was so amazing. She'd won 1 CrossFit Games by the time we started working with her. So it's just perfect timing. She still lived in Australia. It was like amazing. She's like so humble and amazing, but it's been really good for us having worked with her because you can actually see it. And because the CrossFit space is still so like new to the ski erg, really, particularly they do a lot of work on the rower, but you even see these absolute elites, like the top 5s, still haven't done a lot of technique work on it. But that attention to detail, where a number 1 athlete has put effort into a specific ski coach, it shows. That's why she's number 1. It's not just her skiing, but it's the attention to detail that went into the building of that skill is what she's done across the entire board. Like,
yeah,
she's the best because she's just the best. Like, it's
yeah,
amazing. But it's nice being on the team with the person who's the best, undeniably.
yeah, no, cool, yeah. No, that's cool. And yeah, so you were saying you like CrossFit and, you know, you got into that and the coaching and then it carried on
and then seeing how, because the one thing I don't like from an athlete perspective, if I can describe myself as an athlete right now, is because CrossFit is constantly varied. I respect it and I like it from a spectator point of view, but from an athlete, I love that for all of these events, I know exactly what I've got to do. So I can do the work and, you know, leading into the exact same event. So when I saw Hyrox, I was like, there is always rowing and there is always skiing, and it's 1,000 meters. And that is long enough to mean that your technique matters. So, and your efficiency matters. So this is an amazing opportunity for Erg Army. It's also an amazing opportunity for me to be in a space where all the work I've done over the years from a fitness perspective adds up towards it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think when we met, we discussed it quite in depth. You found yourself sort of at the majors last year as Hyrox had sort of branded them for last season, and you were working in America at the time, right? And from there, it's kind of just kept blowing up, I'm guessing.
I was so lucky that was the event I was at. So I was in discussion with Hyrox Australia to move back to Australia because we were working on a project in America to move back to Australia and work for Hyrox Australia. And so in that process of working towards that job, they were like, we want you to race in America. And so I looked at the calendar and I was like, okay, it looks like I can go to the Chicago event. So I was just kind of really lucky that the Chicago event was a major. And I was working as a race director there. And so in the lead up to it, it was, man, I am not designed to be a race director. You've got to be so precise, like measuring everything. And I was like, this is so stressful, knowing that elites were racing there. And I teamed up with my friend Greg, and like the night before, we were like, yeah, let's just do doubles. Let's not either do solo. And it ended up being a major. I got to see the best in the world, like race and absorb like the absolute peak of the sport in that space. It was so lucky, and I just got the biggest taste for it. And like since then, my entire personality is Hyrox.
So let's just rewind on that answer there. So Greg, Jane means Greg from Rock's Life. We love that podcast, and you talk about strategy. Greg loves that sort of thing as well, right? What's his kind of reaction to you and the Ergs? Is it positive one?
Oh my God, I love Greg and I love his podcast as well. And we are both like massive nerds. So like we were a match made in heaven at Hyrox because we're kind of both like jacked nerds is how I would probably describe Greg. And then I'm a fit nerd. But so both of us were just like, we were in the race talking strategy. And so on his podcast, I remember I was adamant, and this is pre ever racing a Hyrox because I was on his podcast and I was like, no, you got to go 4 250s on the road. This is what I thought. Okay. Like, that's what I thought. And I remember on the ski, I was like, ooh, probably time-based. Anyway, we get out there. As soon as we start running, he goes, you're going to hate me, but we're going to do 500 meters each. And he just like looked straight at me, and I was like, ooh, no arguments. This is a no argument conversation. I was like, okay, I hate you. And I did my 500 meters, and then he did his. I am now like 1 effort each, like non-negotiable. Changeovers on rowers are so costly, but he was so smart. I was so lucky to race with him because just little things like the further away the sled is, the heavier it's going to be. I'll do the first half, and just the intelligence with which he approaches the sport was perfect for somebody like me. So my job that day was to keep up with him and do what I was told. And my partner Em will tell you that I'm not really good at doing what I'm told, but on that day I was.
Yeah, no, and I think he like I've listened to his stuff since early on, but you know, it doesn't shock me at all where he's ended up as the main commentator for Hyrox, and
Yeah.
because he's got that kind of analytical eye on what's happening strategy
Oh,
wise, and
he's done
you
his
know,
research.
being mates with you is going to be great, right? Because he can do that bit as well really well now, which is
Yeah.
cool. So yeah, and when you were there in Chicago, obviously you ended up, and I think it was just by chance. It's a nice story, because Zara came here to our workshop with you, but you got exposure and got to chat to the Elite 15 races because it, like you said, it was a coincidence that it was a major, right? But they were there, and then you start
Oh,
talking to them. What is this kind of reaction of that elite racer to this idea? I remember, in fact, you were saying to me when we met about this and their reaction, and I thought about this lecture at uni where this was 2005 when they were talking about high intensity interval training. It was quite early on, and my lecturer said, how do you tell a marathon runner who does like hours and hours and hours of training that actually you can achieve the same thing by doing something slightly different, because you can't rewire it. And I thought of that when you told me about the elites, and I am intrigued for you to tell everyone what the reaction to sort of your input has been so far within the Hyrox space at the elite level.
yes, great question. So my first exposure was a one of the male races, and he was like, "I just put it on a 10 and I just go." And I'm like, "I mean, you're pretty good. This is what I'm thinking is you're pretty good, but potentially you could be better." But I was like, "You know what? That we'll just leave that one there." But my interaction with Zara and Kate, oh man, they are just firstly really really lovely, and secondly absolute weapons. Like, it's ridiculous. So it was actually super random. Again, I was counting the wall balls. Okay, this is how important my job was. So I was counting how many fours there were, sixes there were, nines there were. And this guy overhears me, and he starts laughing at my Australian accent. He was American, and just like in a nice kind of bantery way. And then he's like, "You're a long way from home. What are you doing here? I didn't expect to meet an Aussie here." And I was like explaining, and it turns out he runs a media company, Hybrid Fitness Media, I think it is. And he's like, "Oh, can you show me a couple of things on the ski erg?" And I'm like, "Yeah, get me out of counting these wall balls. Let's go." So we went over to the ski erg, and I started giving him a bit of education, and he just stared at me, and he's like, this is the opposite to what I've been doing. Because what I was explaining to him was the relationship between fatigue and gravity when you're on the ski erg, and how everybody just thinks about the downward stroke and how all the glory comes. But it's like you got to minimize how many times you go down, because every time you go down, you got to come back up on the ski erg. And that's really what's going to cost you. And that's the reason you can come out of the blocks and win the ski erg and literally come last in the whole race, because that catches up to you. And so I'm standing there with him, and then all of the Elite 15 were getting their tour around, and they're kind of like watching. They're like, "What are they learning over there? Like, what's actually happening?" And he calls over Zara and Kate because he knows them. And so they came over, and they were both so humble. I literally cannot believe that like they were so open to learning, and they're literally like some of the fastest in the absolute world, like amazing. And both of them were just like absorbing everything that I could teach them. And Zara and Kate, I'm pretty sure both would ski and row with it on a 7, because that's kind of what Hyrox has said is the starting point. And so there is this expectation, if they've said this is the starting point, potentially research has been done, and that's the best place for it. And when we're talking about 7, I'm talking about the damper setting, and they hadn't really questioned it. And then I was saying to them, look, honestly, the higher the damper is, the more strokes you've got to take to continue the inertia, the forward momentum. So when you're on a ski erg, you don't want to be taking more strokes than is necessary. And because the machine's a variable resistance machine, the more force you apply into the machine, the higher the wattage, the faster you achieve your meters. And so what if we ask the question of, instead of responding to this slowing force of the flywheel, what if we try a little bit harder to create the inertia at a lower damper for less strokes? So what about we just don't look at the surface level of how something works, and we go instead to the next layer of information and try and exploit that, rather than just abide by this top layer incorrect analysis. So from there, Zara changed it straight away. I'm pretty sure she went from a 7 to a 4. And now instead of, kind of redlining at that ski erg, she now can sit on pace with everybody else, use less energy. And Zara's race really starts at the roller and afterwards. So it has absolutely become she calls it her little rest. She gets to have a little sit down, and like the numbers she's holding are not a rest, but in her head they're definitely a rest comparative to what they used to be. So that is the space of those elites now, which I think is really cool. It's like, where can I save just a little bit of energy? And if you can achieve the same result or slightly better for less energy, I mean, that's the key to it.
Yeah, no, wicked. And I think that's the way you've gone through. That's really important, because there'll be a lot of people, if they listen to that section, might get a little bit of a shock, and because their ego is going to be pretty battered from that.
Totally.
But if I ask you the same question about the elite coaches, bearing in mind what you said right at the beginning about our industry not being like, say, the law industry, where you get the specific coaches for things. You've given an example working with Tia Toomey. Now, Shane's a coach. Her husband is her coach, but he absolutely, you're in and you're doing that bit. In terms of the Hyrox elite coaches, as in the guys teaching the elite, what's their reaction to this? Are they involved? Do they want to be involved?
I absolutely love this. You asked some good questions. So, what I would think is, I kind of look at the way Shane coaches Tia, and he's like head coach. And then what he has is, he has like his defensive backline coaches. He has his, like, I don't know anything about American football, but my brain went straight to that. But like, you want to get specialists in on your team. And I think when you look at the hybrid space, I think that the criticism you hear from the CrossFit space is that it's low skill, or it's not complex enough, etc., etc. I think that what people have to start describing the Hyrox space is it's really inclusive. So it's not low skill, it's just a little bit more inclusive. But when you want to get to that elite 15, if you have a coach, that coach either needs to be exceptionally well educated and experienced in all of the obstacles and how they fit with your running. So it's not just a running race, it's not just, a swim. It's like a combination of so many different modalities that fit together. And so I think that when you look at a coach for an elite 15 racer or an elite coach, you want to have somebody or a team that has specialty in all of those areas. Because one of the reasons Greg and I race so well together is we have such a respect for science. Like, we actually look at how stuff, because we're not the youngest people in the room. We're also not people who have dedicated our whole life to being elite athletes, but we kind of want to almost outsmart the system. So we look for that next layer of information. So I would say in this space, it's the responsibility of a coach, similar to Shane Orr, to either enlist the help of specialists and educate themselves, or be like, actually have a team and be a team that really does speak to all of the areas.
Yeah. And I think if we talk about the everyday athlete, because we're talking about applying this to elite athletes, but when we apply these principles that you're coaching on the ergs to us guys like me, the everyday athlete, the difference can be huge, right? In terms of the time differences that they're making. Almost bigger than the 1%. It's bigger than 1% for the everyday.
It's so true, because one of the things I think that people don't, like, the elites don't experience, is the same level of fatigue, because their mental fortitude is, and obviously the engine and everything is unbelievable. Like think of Meg Jacoby finishing with 100 wall balls unbroken. Like, it's outrageous. It's unbelievable. Like, it's so unbelievable. Whereas if you've got somebody who, it's like they're breaking up their wall balls in sets of 4, like, they're there for so long. Like, technique is going to make a really big difference there, and potentially technique on every single obstacle, and they're running leading up to the wall balls to be able to get through that. So it's a really different story, and so many bigger improvements can actually happen for the everyday athlete with an understanding of the attention to detail required to do something well.
Yeah. And I think an example, when you were here on a Wednesday night, on the Saturday and Sunday we had a DECA competition, which is
Yeah.
500 meters. But because it's so zone 3 and upwards, really, when you're doing a deca strong or a deca mile, because it's really short and hard, your 500 meters on a rower and ski actually are quite important in that as well. And I didn't, it's like I was having those light bulb moments when you were coaching, because I thought, actually, this matters, even though it's shorter, because deca is like so full on. That 500 meters, call it 2 minutes, is going to be crucial that you're not overexerting it and expending more energy. And we were world class that weekend after we had seen you on the Wednesday. We were brilliant. We
I'm so
were
happy to hear
we were
that.
all improving. And you know, you had people like my mate Tate. He was doing it, and he hadn't been to the workshop. And
Yeah.
I thought, right, I can work with these guys now, because I've seen it in a race already.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so we'll probably still touch on you as a coach, but last kind of specific coaching question. Here we are recording a podcast, Jane, and we're
Yeah.
days after a new rule announcement for the Ergs.
I
Oh my
know.
words! And like, it just kind of, it's kind of a joke how much that post and these posts have blown up on social media about these rule changes. Because for me personally, it's quite critical, but they're very, very minor. But
Yeah.
the social media world has made them bigger than they are. But one of those rule
Mhm.
changes is you are now allowed to do what the hell you like when you like with the dampener. And I
Yeah.
think we discussed this quite a lot. You do it in your workshop.
Yeah.
You got in there, and normally they'd be set to 7, like you mentioned a minute ago, and you were allowed to move it once. This new rule change with the dampener change, and you can do what the hell you like now. How do you feel about that as a coach?
Great. So it's really funny because I always found the rule really strange that you could only touch it once anyway. Like I was kind of like, this is because the machine is a variable resistance machine. It depends on the input of the user. So it's like the advantage isn't necessarily a certain point on the damper setting. The advantage is understanding how to create the airflow. So it's like for the best ergers in the world, they can change their stroke rate and their power no matter where it is. So you watch someone who's really proficient on there, and they're definitely going to perform better at a certain place than another one, but they know how to adjust their stroke rate and their power output. And so I was always kind of like confused by the rule. So with this new rule, I still think it advantages the people who know the most about it, because what was happening for people is they were getting on a machine, and when a machine is more clean than the one that they've been training on, it feels heavier. So they might, have always trained on a 5, always trained on a 5, but their rower that they've been training on is 10 years old, and they get to Hyrox and it's almost brand new. And this is what I remember trying to explain this to Zara and Kate, because it turned out that some of the machines in Chicago had been unboxed, they were brand new, and some had literally looked like they'd been out in a desert for 16 years. So it's like some of them hold more dirt, which means they feel lighter. Some of them are brand new, which means they feel heavier. So it was a bit of a Russian roulette of like, am I allowed to say that? I don't know if that's like, of gamble. That's what I'm looking for. Of like, if I set it to a 5, is it going to feel like the 5 at home or is it not? And so here, I think that what that means is it's like you can set it somewhere and go, oh no, this feels heavier, it must be cleaner. I'm going to move it to the point where it feels better for me. It is going to be a time vacuum still though. So like if you think about particularly when you're on the rower, like you got to get the handle and kind of like bash it down or bash it up to get it into the right spot. So I think the moment you've got to get there is just one moment to put it somewhere and adjust the effort still based off what you can feel in the flywheel. So I kind of like the new rule change. I think that it just gamifies it slightly more. I don't think it's a disadvantage for me anyway at all teaching it. I feel sorry for the open women who now have to do 100 wall balls, because if you ask my opinion, the wall balls are the worst. But apart from that, I love that the sport really keeps evolving with things like this, and like the Elite 15 doubles. I just think it's so cool that there's an increase in opportunity for people in this. There's an increase in opportunity for people to be a part of it. And it just shows that core value that Hyrox has of inclusivity is actually being lived out. And I think this moving of the damper setting really shows that Hyrox are innovating and they're learning more, and they're realizing it's kind of a bit of a silly rule to be only able to move at once, and it doesn't really help or do anything. So I like it. I think it's cool. I'm pro innovation. I'm pro changing things. So I think it's good.
Yeah, no, that's there's a whole episode in your answer there, because like, and I'll unpack it really quickly. The first, let's go to the gamifying bit. Absolutely agree. Good way of putting it, because this, when I saw it, the first thing I thought was brilliant. If I'm now in a doubles, I can have it on the one that I need, because I have the education of what I need to be
Exactly.
on. But to be fair, the
Love it.
person that I'm with might need to have it on something else, because they're also educated on it. Not because we've
Totally.
got egos and one wants it on a 10 and I want it on my 3, because that's what I want it on.
Totally.
But actually, what
Yeah.
if someone genuinely spent all that time that you said put into it and work it out and etc. etc. and they're a 5 and I'm a 3? Whose are we on?
Exactly.
So for
Yeah.
me, that was class. That was really good. That's why I liked it. The other thing you said was about Hyrox themselves. Now, everyone in this world is human, which means we're all going to make mistakes and we're going to do things that aren't the most optimal way. What I love about Hyrox, and why I'm so biased towards Hyrox, and I've got no sponsors yet for this, so I can say what I want. I I'm really biased because I think they learn very quick. I think they're
Yeah.
very
Agree.
good. And everyone's kicking off last week in the UK. Oh, UK ballot system again. Da, 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 da. Did anyone did anyone stop for a second and just say, fair play? You've put a new Manchester date between Birmingham and XL, which probably people that are doing Birmingham and XL won't want to do. So all the people that didn't get the tickets might go and do that. Yeah, Hyrox, they get this kind of like bad rep in the UK for being this kind of, oh, they don't listen and no one can get a ticket, but actually they do a lot of good as well. And you pointed that out, how they learn and adapt, and the opportunity, like you said, the new doubles Elite 15. Who would have thought? That was brilliant.
Yeah.
I
It
sat there
wasn't
the other
great, and
night.
I didn't see it coming.
I mean, Michelle thought I was nuts because I was celebrating in the sofa. I was like, she's like, what are you reading? I was like, Hyrox have just put an Elite 15 for doubles. How good is this?
Yes.
And an assumption, you've been to Worlds. The assumption is Elite 15 solo Friday, Elite 15 double Saturday night, and relay Sunday. Is that what they're going to do? I don't know, but it kind of seems logical,
I
right?
hope so. I absolutely hope so, because it was just like unbelievable watching those people race. And doubles is a different sport in itself. Like, it's like watching a strategy in a doubles race, and like the teamwork that goes into it and how fast they can actually go is incredible. It's a great spectator sport. Like, it will be so entertaining. I can't wait to see that. And again, relay, totally different as well. Like, I would hate being in a relay, because imagine sprinting 1,000 meters followed by whatever obstacle you're doing, literally at a sprint. Oh man, I couldn't think of anything worse. I would die. I would have to be on the farmer's carry.
Yeah. I've not done one yet, so it might be worth trying it just to see what it's
Yeah,
like.
true,
But
same.
actually,
I haven't either. I'm just speculating.
we probably have that in common as well. We're both fans of the sport as well. We enjoy
Yeah,
watching that elite race as well, and not just
yeah,
being involved as athletes. But you, as an athlete, you've competed at World Championships twice.
yep,
You did 2
yep,
races. Um,
yep.
for you as an athlete in this space, what's your kind of like aims as an athlete? You've got certain aims for this new season that we've started? Have you got long-term aims? What's the goal?
Great question. So, when Greg and I raced in Chicago, we actually came second in our age group, but I had to fly out before the presentation. So I never got my flag, and I never got to like stand on the podium. And so my goal after that, and we got our ticket to World Champs then, my goal after that was to get on the podium in anything and get a flag. I just really wanted a flag. And so I was really lucky to qualify for World Champs there, and then I raced again in London in May and ended up qualifying. And this is from the roll down, like completely transparently here. I qualified in Women's Open, and I think I came like 25th. But because all the people ahead of me had already qualified in all of the races that they'd done. I qualified and then also qualified in female doubles with my teammate there. And again, it was from the roll down. And so I remember my partner was like, what are they handing out world champs tickets like candy now? And I was like, hey, I'm fast at this sport. I'm like, but it was pretty funny because I was like, that was the luck of the draw there. But racing in Nice gave me a real taste for the feeling that I think a lot of people get when they race Hyrox, which is, I think I could be quite good at this. Like, I think I could actually do quite well at this. And so I don't know. I think I'm scared to set a goal with it because a lot of people think they could be quite good at it. And I just raced recently in Singapore and came third overall and second in my age group, and with a 1 hour 16 though, so very far off these elite times for a pro race. But I was proud of it, and it came off the back of 6 months of traveling and not really any focused training, just jumping in whenever and wherever I could. So I think my goal is just to see what my body is actually capable of. I want to do the solo pro in Hong Kong in a couple of months, and then I'm actually racing mixed doubles with a friend of mine. His name's Chris Woolley, and he has a 59-minute pro. I think he came second in Melbourne or something. So he's kind of one to watch in Australia in the men's space. And so I'm racing with him, and I'm a little bit nervous about it. But I think my goal as an athlete is just to keep being able to show up and surprise myself with what I'm capable of. And from a training perspective, actually stick to a plan, because part of my business is to jump into sessions wherever it is that I'm working. And so like today, I've done 2 workouts and they were both back squats and lower body strength, which everybody knows is not going to be a well-rounded training program, but sometimes my work requires that of me. So I think what I'm looking for is the discipline to stick to a goal and do the work and see what I'm actually capable of. Maybe an hour 10 pro would feel really, I'd be super proud of that.
No, that's really cool. That's wicked. And like you said, it does give you that little bit of I can do this and I can do this well.
Yeah.
And especially when you gamify a bit and you're very strategic like you are, there's a lot, right, where 1 or 2% is going to start making huge numbers for us at this level. So I think cool, that's really good. And you mentioned sort of a few of the Australian races there. You guys are in season 2, is it the second season?
I don't know, maybe. I don't know. I thought it was just the start of the season.
I think it's the second season that you guys have had Hyrox in the
as in it's our second. Yeah. It is.
Season.
Yeah, we're in season 2. Yeah. Very new.
Like, you guys are absolute world beaters, Olympics world beaters, CrossFit world beaters. Like, you're world beaters. You don't have a good soccer team, but other than that, you're world beaters and everything. But I think when the Aussies get hold of this perception of like a British guy that's wrapped up in a lot of sports, my perception is you guys are going to get hold of this and you're going to come and be world beaters. And to some extent, JK already showed us that a bit in the Worlds. Look at his improvement. He's there. There's more coming through. What do you think about the Aussies and the future of Hyrox?
JK is so dominant, isn't he? And I think he put himself in the exact right environment to get better last season. Like, he didn't just go, oh, I'm pretty good. Like, I'm good for an Aussie. He was like, I'm immersing myself fully in this and I'm going to become an absolute unstoppable weapon. And I think that it's really, so I'm in a really exciting environment. Just got a job with a brand called LSKD, which is like a clothing brand. And LSKD, and Em's working in the athlete space for LSKD, and they work with a lot of like CrossFit athletes, Olympians, and now the Hyrox space is getting really exciting. So Em's getting very immersed in the space as well. So it's just like, there's a lot of Hyrox chat that goes on in our house, which is really cool and really exciting. And so we're constantly talking about these kind of next up and coming athletes. And one of the things that happened in season 1 in Australia was inclusion. Everyone just wanted to be a part of it. And no one had any idea what fast was. Nobody had any idea what slow was. Everyone was just like, I did a Hyrox and it was the best. It's like, it kind of, I describe it to people that haven't heard of it as like a music festival, but like nobody's high. Everybody's just doing their best and doing something good for themselves. You get so many high fives. Everyone cheers for you. Like, you know, quick diversion here. I remember every lap I ran, you cheered for me. And so I was looking forward to seeing you because it felt so good to receive that love and support. And so I think that, you know, I think that the Australians are definitely to watch. I think Joanna Wetrick is unbelievable. She has an hour and 58-minute, I think, was her fastest. And she's going to be racing elites in Amsterdam, which is so exciting for us that there's an Australian woman. She's 22. I think it will be incredible for her to race against the fastest in the world. I think it will be the best learning experience, and similar to what JK got to do last season, I think she can fully immerse herself in what this sport actually is. Because in Australia, it's very young. We're still like really trying to figure out what makes a good hybrid athlete, what makes a good Hyrox athlete. And I'm excited to watch the space here. The buy-in to it is amazing. Like Melbourne sold out, pretty sure Sydney sold out, Brisbane potentially. We've got Perth this weekend, and they've announced another Melbourne event in December. And I think that could potentially be the first qualifier for the Elite 15 doubles event. So
Yeah.
I think we're going to get a lot of people internationally coming to Melbourne, which is exciting.
Yeah, no, because because it was to be announced, wasn't it, which Australian one was going to be, but yeah, that makes sense now. So yeah,
and being from Melbourne, I'm very proud that it's Melbourne, because in Melbourne we're very much the second to Sydney. Like Sydney are it. Like you fly into Sydney, there's beaches, it's just unbelievable, Sydney. And then Melbourne's kind of like, yeah, but we've got like really good coffee. And that's kind of like what we're famous for. And now we've got Hyrox. Like it's like we're just like, see, it's Melbourne.
So you will you try and be actively at the Hyroxes in Australia?
Yeah. So I am a bit sad that Perth is tomorrow. But yeah, I'm 100% going to be at Melbourne. I'm racing women's doubles and mixed doubles. And I'll be in and around it completely. But yeah, any Hyrox events in Australia, I just want to be a part of. Like same as Asia Pacific. Like I want to be at as many of them as I possibly can. Like we're really lucky that Hyrox came along. It's been unbelievable for Erg Army, and it's spread out. It's like really extended our network. So when I'm there, I get to like cheer for and support people that are in our, you know, community. So it's really important to be as visible as possible at those, and to be as involved as possible at all of them.
Yeah, and like that was going to be my one of my last questions really about the future of Erg Army. What is the future of Erg Army?
So Erg Army was always supposed to be a short-term, like, here's all the education, here you go industry, like now go and boom with it, like take it, build the pillars. And like it was always, for me, Erg Army was always giving people a tool to show them what they were capable of. Like it's that sharing the magic. It's like empowering people with the education, you know, teach the fish to fish rather than give a fish. That's kind of what I planned on doing. And then it just kept snowballing, and now I'm now at this point 8 years later where I'm the Erg lady, and really I want to be like the, you know, I don't know what lady, but I'm really obsessed with this idea of betterment and giving people the tools to be better and the best that they can possibly be. So I'm not exactly sure where I want to go. I just know that I don't want to be so specialized forever. I know that I want to build confidence. I want to build capability. I want to give people, you know, tools that they can go and take into the world that aren't just specific to the Ergs. So I'm not exactly sure. I know I'm really a really good educator. And I know I love Hyrox, and I know I love Ergs. So it's kind of working its magic right now, but I don't know if it's forever. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, you're a great educator for sure. I can say that from her first-hand experience. And do us a favor, don't delete the Erg Army account then, because we need to look at it.
It's good, right? I know there's lots of free content on there.
Yeah, there's so much. People should go there and look at that really quickly. It's really important. And then, So I always do like the last question is a kind of top 3 tips. I'm going to let you choose. You can either do Erg specific top 3 tips, or you can do like Hyrox top 3 tips. You choose, or a mix.
Oh, okay. So, all right. I think I'm going to go with Hyrox specific top tips that I've got. Okay. For everyone always says don't come out too hot, blah, 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 blah. But I think for the everyday athlete, I think people underrate themselves. And I think that they're capable of more than they think they are. So if you look at the elite racer versus the everyday racer, and I think that someone actually gave me the advice before Chicago to give it a good crack from the beginning. Like, don't overpace it. And I think that going into it with as much knowledge of what you're capable of as possible, and starting out just below where you don't think you can sustain it. I actually think for an everyday racer could show people what they're actually capable of. But as part of that, as the subsection 1 to that first one, you don't want to win the ski erg. You don't want to actually be the first one off it. And so that's kind of the asterisk below that first one, but really do make yourself a little bit uncomfortable when it comes to Hyrox, because that discomfort is what's going to show you what you can do, not just in Hyrox, but in life as well. The second piece of advice I've got is absolutely a partner piece of advice, and that is time-based efforts on the ski erg. And I see everywhere people dividing the work on distance. And unless you and your teammate are identical in across the entire race on how you manage fatigue, how efficient you are, and your strengths, etc., time is the equalizer. So if I was on the ski erg with Greg and we both did 250 meters, Greg would take maybe 50 to 55 seconds to do it, and I'd take a minute probably. And so suddenly the weaker athlete is spending a greater amount of time on the machine than the stronger athlete. And so I would say, whereas if Greg and I both did 40 seconds to 45 seconds, let's say he gets 200 meters in there and I get 175, we both contributed the same amount of time and the same amount of effort to the machine, and the stronger athlete has actually done more of the meters. So I always recommend people do time-based efforts on there. The third piece of advice I have when it comes to Hyrox is train your running because it's a running race. And everybody can see, like, I know I've brought up Meg already, but Meg Jacoby, like, you see her running and it's just like years and years of beautiful running, that it is such a lower effort. And even if you're starting today and your race is, in 12 weeks time, that's where you want to be spending a lot of time becoming efficient. And like, it is a running race where you have to be really strong and really efficient on the machines, but it is a running race. The third one could be about damper setting, but I feel like I just talk about damper setting all the time. I would probably say moving your damper lower than what your ego tells you to do is going to do you a massive favor. So like, I row with it on a 3 at Hyrox and I ski with it on a 2 when I'm doing women's pro. And I think I got the fastest, actually I did get the fastest ski time in Singapore and second fastest row, I'm pretty sure. And so it's like the high damper will not contribute to achieving the meters faster. Yeah, there's about 10 tips.
No,
Can't limit me.
That's brilliant. People can box that and sell it. That's brilliant. Yes. Yeah, no, they're great. They're it's really good. And it's funny actually, that question brings up the running all the time. I don't think anyone's answered it without mentioning running, because I think you're right. I think it's a really good point. And we can be the best sled pusher and wall baller and erger in the world, but actually if you can't run, you're probably on a loser. So yeah.
Exactly.
But there you go. No, brilliant. So Jane, thank you so much for coming. Really insightful for everyone. If anyone wants to follow you, where are they looking for that?
Best spot is Instagram. So at Erg Army, ERGARMY. Awesome.
So thanks again, Jane. And to everyone who's listened or watched, anyone who is getting lots from this or thinks there's someone that knows that they need some help with their ergs, make sure you share this episode. Make sure people understand that the ergs are important. And I think Jane has told us there what ergs are and why they're so important in our hybrid space. So do share this with anyone who you think could gain from it. Also, like, comment, subscribe. It makes a huge difference to us little podcasters, and we really appreciate it. And all I would say is, once again, Jane, thanks very much. And for
Thank you so
everyone,
much.
for everyone listening and watching, we will meet here again to discuss more on the rocks.